Welcome back, you guys. Tonight we have a pretty interesting build on a 1911 style Taurus. Overall, we don't happen to see a lot of these on our YouTube channel. There are a lot of hurdles that come along with the 1911 base slides. We're going to do some cut work. We're going to do some talking. Overall, I want to give you a feel for what is offered and what we do offer, and obviously those challenges and why we don't quite see all of the services listed on this particular type of weapon. Before we get to that, customer ended up obviously sending in the request, wanted to have something done, and they also ended up sending a Wisconsin challenge coin along with the slide. Of course, we'll add some pictures to this outside when we get down to the final details of the build side by side. Overall, really cool. It kind of makes me think like if people were going to send me something to put into a YouTube video and they sent me different challenge coins from their state, it'd be kind of cool to have a collection of them. So with that being said, yeah, if you just have thought about sending something, you want to do a YouTube video, you want it to be in the YouTube video, you're unsure of maybe what you can send or what you want to send, we do recommend you send something from your state because I don't get out all that much. I just seem to work all the time. And a challenge coin would be pretty cool because then I could have a little collection of the contiguous 48, or if we have some people outside, and have a collection of those. That'd be really cool overall. Definitely a great idea. So guys, let's jump back to the build. Let's talk a little bit about what we do offer on the 1911s. Okay, so over the last 2.5, 3 years, we've obviously taken in a lot of 1911s. We've done a lot of work. You guys have seen some of that on our Instagram, a few videos on our YouTube. Of course, we've had higher end builds that you guys have seen at some of the local gun shows and some of the Facebook Live events that we've done. But we have a lot of challenges with these, and I want to just kind of step back. I do want to talk about the work that we're going to be doing. I do want to talk about the challenges. Of course, we're going to talk a little bit more about that as we get a completed slide in hand. We get to show it off a little bit more. So one of the first things that you're going to notice that we run into with the 1911 style slides is they're not really all that wide, okay? And what that means is because they're not that wide, we're unable to do optic cuts in the back. Most of the time we see a request for something like a Trichicon, something like a Hollow Sun. The issue that you run into is the screws actually would be protruding out through the sides, and because the slide isn't wide enough. So one of the things that you're going to lose is the rear dovetail, the screws aren't going to fit, and then of course on some of the slides that have deeper edged rear serrations, we even lose even more of the width of the slide. So that's a common request that we get, but that's something that we don't offer. I know there's a lot of companies out there doing some sort of a plate system. We have gone down this path in the past that you guys haven't seen, and it might be something that we might reapproach again in the event that you were to purchase a plate system from us, so that way at least we know what we're getting. There are a lot of different manufacturers of plate systems that are out there, so we do tend to just say no, we don't offer it because we're not really geared up to manufacture our own plate system, which we have put that on the checklist of things for 2022 review. So that's kind of one of those things. Now let's also talk about the overall length of the slide. So what you're going to notice on this one is it's a little bit shorter than what you would get with like a GI standard slide, which would be a 5-inch. So this is a little bit shorter, so therefore ultimately we run into issues. Bushing in the front that we get with the barrel, so that's that little cap that goes in here, slides in and turns from this way to lock the barrel and the spring together in the plunger. And what happens is this takes up a pretty good amount of room on some of these guns, and when we're talking about a shorter slide, we're talking about less and less room to actually work on the slide because of this. So that's one of the issues that we run into in the front. This would cause issues with side windows. This would obviously cause issues with the top window and things like that. So we have to work around that. The other issue you run into is, and it's going to be hard to see, but you guys can see these little rolls on the inside. Now that's going to be your lockup lugs for your barrel, so the barrel and slide mate together there, and that comes up to about right in this general area. So give or take a little bit, it's right in here. So by the time you go here and you take the bushing off of the front, you got this, okay? So that rolls also over the side. We don't want to cut over into here under where the lockup is. Obviously we don't want to cut on the top. So those are just some of the obvious gotchas. Of course, we have other things like some slides have front serrations, some don't have front serrations, some are a different length, which we had already discussed. We've got text on some of the sides, no text on some of the other sides. So it's really interesting to think about it, but if you walk through a gun store, a gun shop, some sort of maybe a gun show, and you look, you're going to see M&P, you're going to see Glock, you're going to see CZ, and one of the things that you're going to, maybe you haven't taken this into consideration or haven't thought this through completely, is that, you know, Glock makes itself, and Ruger makes a line, and M&P makes a line, and CZ makes a line. But what you're also going to find out is that some of the big players, SIG, Ruger, Smith & Wesson, obviously Kimber, Colt, the list goes on, they also make their version of a 1911 line. And now that doesn't necessarily mean all those parts fit together, okay? We can't just take a barrel out of a Wilson Combat and drop it into a Taurus. They may not work. They may not even be the same length. One may be a bull barrel, one may be a thin barrel. The lockup area may be different. The lugs are probably different. So that's one of the things to take into consideration when you think of, well, how come there aren't that many people out there working on 1911s? Well, there's so many different versions of the 1911 that every one of those companies has really standardized on what would be their own version and not some sort of industry standard. Now, we do have some sort of a mil spec or USGI based stuff, but that doesn't necessarily mean everybody's still following those same rules. They don't all still have the same front and rear serrations. They all don't have the same curvature on the top. So the specs that would come into play with some sort of a standardized 1911 don't necessarily have anything to do with bushing lengths and lockup lugs and serrations. So when those are all things that we have to necessarily work around when we are talking about patterns. So I know it seems like I'm kind of getting off path here for what we're doing, but this is a lot of an educational video here because we don't do a lot of the 1911s. I am trying to educate you guys a little bit more on why the work is what it is and why we're picky on what we do take in, and we have tried to come up with some simplified versions like we're going to do today that do somewhat work on all of the 1911 slides through all of the manufacturers that are out there. So let's kind of jump into the actual work, and this might educate you a little bit more on what we will offer on your model because it's more of a standardized service. So the Raptor cuts, you guys happen to see the Raptor cuts on a lot of the Glocks, the CZs, the M&Ps. You see them on a lot of everything. We have a different version of the Raptor cuts that we do on the 1911. They come a little bit higher on the top of the slide, okay, because we have such a dome here. So we end up finding that they come a little bit closer. There's only a little peg in between the centers here, and they come down the sides pretty far. Now, once again, some of the 1911s are different. I haven't actually checked this one, but if you look at some of the other versions that are out there that you'll find, you'll see that the actual left side of the weapon versus the right side is actually not the same thickness on the taper. So if you were to actually get your measuring gauge out and you measured the flats over here, then you rolled your slide and you measured the flats from here to here, you may find out that this flat is actually smaller than this one that's over here. This is a pretty common thing. We see this a lot on what would be some of the Berettas. I've seen it actually on several of the CZs as well, usually towards the rear on the right side of the dovetail. So I'm not 100% sure if this is some sort of a manufacturing thing or if this was, you know, that's how their specs were. I don't know. I can't get into the heads of the manufacturers. But what I can tell you is that does cause a problem sometimes when you're doing the Raptor cuts, because on one side you're like, hey man, you kind of went into the flat, but you didn't go into the flat here. And then when you actually measure it, you'll realize the flat on this side is actually smaller. So somewhere between the taper of the back to the front, this width is actually smaller than it would be on the other side, so therefore the pattern looks like it's off. So we end up going through this where we try to correct things. We try to take a couple extra thou off on one side to make it look as though it's correct, even though it's incorrect based off of proportional base depths. So cosmetically, we try to correct things. In all actuality, we're working around hurdles that maybe we shouldn't have done in the first place. So today we're going to be doing Raptor cuts. We're going to try to stay away from those that lockup bushing in the front. We're going to stay away from the barrel lugs in the back, right up in here. So the locking lugs on the slide, I should say, up here. So we're going to take some measurements before we do that. You guys may actually see some Sharpie markers, mark lines, whatever you want to call them, on the slide as it's in the CNC. The other thing to take into consideration is because it's such a dome top, and then we cut down to the sides, we end up getting a lot of trash in those curved cuts. Okay, so we see that a lot more because it's not a square internal cut, like on all of your striker fired based weapons. They're pretty much down, and then they just have they're over, and then they're back up again. And we don't get that, so we get a curve. So it's really detrimental on the way in which we cut, the angle in which we cut, how we clean up before we color, to make sure we don't see chips and we don't see issues like that. So there's a lot that goes into the work, the cleanup, and then and ultimately onto the coloring. So if you don't have all those things aligned, in which it took us a long time to get those parameters all in order, ultimately you'll see an inferior base product overall. So we try to offer that superior based design cut work, and that's what we're going to do here today. So guys, we're going to try to get over to the 770 now, and we're going to go ahead and get this thing cut, and let's just see what it comes out looking like. We're going to go be coloring this in OD green. We have all the parts here to reassemble the upper, including the barrel, so we're going to get to see how all that lays, and let's just see what we come up with. All right, guys, let's take a look and see exactly how this came out. So what we've done is we went ahead and did that cut work on here, added the coloring back to it, and we did go ahead and reassemble it. We wanted to show it to you guys just as a little bit more of a complete slide, giving that barrel exposure. Wanted to kind of just show it to you overall like what it would be when it's mounted back onto the frame. So we're able to see some nice barrel down through the sides here. Of course, we'll include some pictures to be able to see it just a little bit better where that's outside versus inside here in the shop. And overall, really, really nice. So kind of as we had discussed at the beginning of this video, limited services on the 1911 slides. We just don't happen to offer a whole lot. We do offer the Raptor cuts. It's something that does give it a little bit of weight reduction. It does also allow you to see some of the barrel. We do also offer stuff like the barrel hard coatings and some of the logo stuff. So there is still stuff that is offered. We do try to have that more of a generic based universal pattern that would kind of work with any of those manufacturers that are making those 1911 based slides that are out there. And that's the primary reason that we ended up doing this video. We wanted to, one, give a little bit of credit for the customer who ended up providing the challenge coin, and we also wanted to kind of just show the work as a whole. So I'm going to keep it short and sweet with you guys. Basically, if you're curious about this as a service, it's not listed on our webpage. You would have to send it to us by form of an email or some other means, whether you're on Instagram or Facebook. We're going to end up quoting you out. Raptor cuts on a 1911 slide are $140 as of right now. Now, of course, if the pattern was to change or the service was no longer offered, then obviously costs and things would change along the line. But as it sits right now, you're looking at about $140 and a $50 coloring charge. So you're about $190 plus return shipping out the door. So you're not spending a whole lot. You are able to change that appearance just a little bit greater over what you're getting with the factory. Obviously, we're getting that weight reduction. And once again, obviously, we're getting that barrel exposure. So there happens to be a kind of an added bonus to the cut work to change that factory gun that you have. And obviously, you're getting some benefited factors of the cut work off of there. So guys, if you have not been following us on Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube, do so. We have a lot of older content that's on there. We've got a lot of big newer build videos, some unique stuff like the 1911 stuff. We've got some other things coming out here just right around the corner. We've got a lot of big builds that we're still working on, wrapping up, waiting for some of those barrels to come back and things like that. So really stay tuned on that. And obviously, if you guys have any kind of questions about anything, concerns, feel free to send us an email. If you go to NCEngravers.com, there is a contacts tab. We also have our cell numbers on there. My wife and myself, you can text us if you have a question. You can send a picture if you've got just a, hey, I saw some service, I've got a gun, does it work on this? That kind of thing. So you can message us through there. We do process orders by email. So what that ends up being is if you are to text us, if you are to send us something on Instagram or Facebook, we're going to end up asking for your email anyhow, because that's how we end up processing those orders. We can keep track of all of the fine details of the build as we work through the project here on our end. So that's how we're going to end up processing that. But definitely follow us, share, like, feel free to leave a comment. You know, we're always going back, reviewing comments, giving us other ideas of what we can do, what we shouldn't do, what maybe we would have changed if we were going to do it again. So that kind of thing. So feel free to leave a comment, give us your opinion, because it does count. So guys, if you need anything, just feel free to reach out to us and just kind of stand by for some new videos.